In 2006, the music industry was dying. Not slowly, not quietly. It was hemorrhaging billions of dollars a year, and everyone inside it knew exactly who to blame. Pirates. Millions of ordinary people who had decided, almost overnight, that music should be free. The record labels fought back the only way they knew how. They sued. They sued teenagers. They sued grandmothers. They sued a 12-year-old girl living in public housing. And the piracy kept growing. Then a 23-year-old from Stockholm looked at the wreckage and saw something the entire industry had missed. You cannot beat free with a lawsuit. You can only beat free with something better. This is the story of how a Swedish college dropout walked into the most hated business in entertainment, made a deal nobody thought was possible, and rebuilt the way the world listens to music. From nothing. To understand what Daniel Ek was up against, you have to understand what piracy actually was. It started in 1999 with a program called Napster. A 19-year-old built it in his dorm room, and within 2 years, 80 million people were using it. Suddenly, every song ever recorded was available instantly for free. The labels panicked. They sued Napster into oblivion. And it changed nothing, because piracy was already everywhere else. Kazaa, LimeWire, BitTorrent, the Pirate Bay run out of Sweden by a handful of activists who treated copyright law as a joke. Global recorded music revenue fell from over $20 billion to barely half that. An entire generation grew up believing, sincerely, that paying for a single song was absurd. And here was the part nobody in a label boardroom wanted to admit. The pirates had built a better product. Free, infinite, and instant. The labels were selling $15 plastic discs with 2 good songs and 10 bad ones. The customer had already voted. Daniel Ek grew up in Ragsved, a working-class suburb south of Stockholm. He got his first computer at 5 and started writing code not long after. By his early teens, he was building websites for local businesses out of his bedroom, charging real money, running a small team of older kids he paid in video games and pornography he was too young to legally own. He applied to one of Sweden's top engineering schools, lasted a matter of weeks, and dropped out. He had already concluded that the things he wanted to learn could not be taught in a lecture hall. By 23, he had made enough money from a string of startups to retire. He bought a red Ferrari. He bought an apartment in central Stockholm. He went to nightclubs. And he was miserable. Sitting alone in that expensive apartment, he realized money had bought him nothing that mattered. So he sold the Ferrari, moved to a cabin, and started asking what problem was actually worth his life. If you are finding this interesting, hit subscribe. We tell the real story behind a new build every few days. The problem he kept returning to was music. He loved it, and he could see that the industry built around it was on fire. Here is the insight that started everything. Ek studied how people actually pirated music, and he noticed something everyone else had ignored. Piracy was not really about price, it was about friction. Downloading a song from a torrent meant searching shady sites, dodging viruses, waiting minutes for a file, hoping it was the right version and not a corrupted fake. People did not pirate because free was irresistible. They pirated because, at that moment, it was the easiest option available. So Ek asked the question that no record executive had thought to ask. What if you could build something legal that was faster than stealing? Not a download, a stream. Press play, and the song begins in under 200 milliseconds. No waiting, no files, no viruses. Every song ever recorded, instantly, in a single app that felt like magic. If he could make legal music more convenient than piracy, the pirates would not need to be sued. They would simply switch. It sounds obvious now. In 2006, it was heresy. Because to build it, he would need the one thing the entire industry was least willing to give him. 200 milliseconds. That was the target. Press play, and the music had to start before your brain registered the wait. In 2006, on the internet speeds of the time, that was considered impossible. Ek partnered with Martin Lorentzen, an older Swedish entrepreneur who had made a fortune in advertising, and together they assembled a small team of engineers obsessed with one thing: speed. They tore apart every assumption about how audio moved across the internet. Instead of streaming a song from one distant server, they borrowed a trick from the pirates themselves. They built the app on peer-to-peer technology, so a song could arrive in pieces from other users nearby, not just from a central computer. They cached the opening seconds of tracks on your device so playback began the instant you clicked, while the rest streamed in behind it. They obsessed over milliseconds the way watchmakers obsess over gears. The name came from a misheard word Lorentzen shouted across the room: Spotify. It meant nothing. That was the point, a blank canvas. By 2007, they had a prototype that worked. Music started instantly. It felt like witchcraft, and it was completely, gloriously illegal because they did not yet have permission to play a single one of those songs. A beautiful product that plays no music legally is worthless. To launch, EK needed licenses from the major record labels, Universal, Sony, Warner, and the rest. The same labels that had spent the last 7 years suing their own customers. The same labels that viewed any internet company as a thief in a nice suit. And here came a 24-year-old Swede with no track record in music, asking them to hand over their entire catalogs to an app that on paper looked exactly like the piracy that was killing them. The meetings were brutal. Executives kept him waiting for hours. They demanded enormous advances, millions of dollars up front, before a single user had signed up. They wanted equity in his company. They wanted control. One negotiation alone dragged on for over 2 years. EK flew back and forth between Stockholm, London, New York, and Los Angeles, again and again, often to be told no. He later said he had to convince the labels of something that terrified them. That giving away music for free legally was not surrender. It was the only weapon that could actually kill piracy. Most of them did not believe him. They signed anyway, because they were desperate, and because slowly, deal by deal, he wore them down. The deal EK finally struck was radical, and it rested on a single idea the industry hated. Free. Spotify would have 2 tiers. A free version, supported by advertising, where you could listen to almost anything with the occasional ad between songs. And a paid version, about $10 a month, with no ads, higher quality, and the ability to download music to your phone. The labels were horrified by the free tier. Free was the enemy. Free was the disease. But EK's argument was relentless. The people using the free version were not lost-paying customers. They were pirates, people who were currently paying the labels nothing at all. A pirate who listens to one ad is infinitely more valuable than a pirate who listens to none. And once those free users got comfortable, a steady fraction of them would upgrade to paying, because paying was easy and the product was good. This model has a name: freemium. Give the core away, charge for the premium. It would later become the blueprint for half the software industry. But in 2008, betting the survival of recorded music on giving it away for free was, to most executives, completely insane. They let him try it anyway. They were out of better ideas. In October 2008, Spotify launched across Europe, not with a splashy public release, but with invitations, a deliberate trickle that made access feel like a privilege. The reaction was immediate and almost disbelieving. People who had pirated music for a decade tried Spotify and simply stopped pirating. Not out of guilt, out of convenience. The legal product was now genuinely better than the illegal one. It had everything, it started instantly, and the free version cost nothing. In Sweden, the effect was staggering. Music piracy, which had been a national pastime, collapsed within a few years as Spotify spread. The country that had given the world the Pirate Bay became the country that proved piracy could be beaten. Not by lawyers, but by a better mousetrap. Revenue that had been flowing to no one started flowing back to the labels and eventually to artists. Spotify grew across Europe, then prepared for the prize that had eluded it the longest. The United States, the largest music market on earth, and the one most fiercely guarded by the very labels EK had spent years fighting. Breaking into America took 3 more years of negotiation. The United States labels were the most powerful and the most resistant, and they extracted the hardest terms. When Spotify finally launched there in July 2011, EK pulled a masterstroke. He partnered with Facebook, then at the peak of its growth, so that what your friends were listening to appeared directly in their feed. Music became social. A song your friend played could be played by you in a single click. Growth exploded. But success brought a new kind of enemy. Apple, which had dominated music for a decade through iTunes and the 99-cent download, suddenly faced a competitor who was making downloads obsolete. Why buy a song for $1 when you could stream every song for $10 a month? Apple fought back hard. It launched its own streaming service. It used its control of the iPhone App Store to charge Spotify a 30% tax on every subscription sold through the app. Money that went straight to Spotify's biggest rival. EK now found himself fighting a war on 2 fronts. Against the labels who supplied his music, and against the company that controlled the phone in nearly every customer's pocket. Not everyone celebrated. As Spotify grew, a question grew louder. If listening was now almost free, how did the people who made the music get paid? Spotify paid the labels a share of its revenue every time a song was streamed. But a single stream was worth a tiny fraction of a cent, and the money passed through the labels before it ever reached an artist. For superstars with billions of streams, the checks were enormous. For everyone else, streaming felt like a betrayal. Fractions of pennies for work that once sold for $15 a copy. In 2014, Taylor Swift pulled her entire catalog from Spotify in protest, arguing that valuable work should not be free. Tom York of Radiohead called it the last desperate fart of a dying corpse. The criticism stung, and not all of it was unfair. X's defense was blunt. The alternative to Spotify was not the old world of $15 albums. That world was already dead, killed by piracy. The alternative was zero. Spotify, he argued, was turning piracy back into revenue, slowly rebuilding an industry that had nearly ceased to exist. Both things were true at once. The industry was being saved, and many of the people inside it felt poorer than ever. By 2018, Spotify had over 150 million users and had become the largest music streaming service on the planet. It was time to go public. But Eck refused to do it the normal way. A traditional public offering hands enormous fees to Wall Street banks, who set the price and reward their favored clients. Eck thought that was absurd for a company built on cutting out middlemen. So Spotify did something almost no major company had ever done. A direct listing. No banks setting the price, no new shares sold, no fanfare. The stock simply opened on the New York Stock Exchange and let the market decide what it was worth. On the day it listed, instead of raising the American flag over the exchange, Spotify accidentally flew the wrong country's flag entirely, and Eck did not even ring the bell. He stayed in Europe and called it just another day. The market valued the company at nearly $30 billion. A teenager from a Stockholm suburb who had retired at 23, bored and unhappy, had built one of the most valuable entertainment companies in the world by giving music away for free. The industry that had refused to take his calls now depended on him for its survival. But Eck understood a hard truth about his own business. Spotify did not own the music it sold. The labels did. And every year, Spotify handed roughly 70% of its revenue straight back to those labels for the right to stream their songs. It was a company with enormous scale and painfully thin margins, forever squeezed by the suppliers it had once begged for licenses. So Eck made his next bet. If he could not escape paying for music, he would build something he did own: podcasts. Starting around 2019, Spotify spent billions buying podcast studios and signing exclusive deals. Most famously, a reported $100 million agreement with Joe Rogan, the most popular podcaster in the world. The logic was cold and clear. A podcast Spotify owned cost it nothing per play, unlike a song. More listening hours, lower costs, fatter margins. It was the same move he had always made. Study where the friction and the money really were, then build the thing nobody expected. Spotify was no longer a music app. It was becoming the world's audio platform, fighting for every minute of attention in your ears. Today, Spotify reaches well over 500 million users across more than 180 countries. It streams music in nearly every language, recommends songs through algorithms that know your taste better than your friends do, and has reshaped how an entire planet discovers music. The album, once the basic unit of the industry, has given way to the playlist and the single track. Artists now write songs engineered to survive the first 30 seconds, because that is when a listener decides to skip. A placement on a major Spotify playlist can launch an unknown musician overnight, which means the company that distributes the music now quietly shapes what music gets made. The industry that nearly died of piracy is growing again, year after year, and the overwhelming majority of that growth comes from streaming. Daniel Ek did not just save a business. He rewired the relationship between listeners, artists, and the songs themselves, turning music from something you own into something you simply tap into, like water from a faucet or power from a wall. It is worth pausing on how unlikely all of this was. In 2006, the smartest, richest, most powerful people in the music industry had been fighting piracy for years and losing. They had armies of lawyers and decades of experience, and they could see no way out except to sue their own customers into submission. The answer that finally worked did not come from inside that industry at all. It came from a bored 23-year-old in Stockholm who loved music, understood software, and asked a question so simple it sounded naive. What if we just made the legal thing better than the illegal one? He was told no for years. He was hated by artists, squeezed by labels, and attacked by Apple. He bet everything on giving away the very thing everyone else was trying to protect. And it worked. Not perfectly, not without real costs to the musicians caught in the middle, but it worked. Piracy, the unstoppable force that was supposed to kill recorded music, was beaten. Not by force, by convenience. A working-class suburb, a college dropout, a retired 23-year-old miserable in an apartment he had bought with money that meant nothing. He sold the Ferrari, found the one problem worth his life, and walked straight into the most hated, most defensive business in entertainment to solve it. The labels said no. The artists said no. Apple said no. And one by one he wore them all down. Not with force, but with a product so good the world simply switched. The next time you press play, and a song begins before you have finished the thought, remember that a decade of lawyers said this was impossible. One Swede decided it was just a problem of friction. He built the answer from nothing. If you want to know how more impossible things actually got built, subscribe. There are a lot more stories like this one.